Welcome to episode 198 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, the final episode of our three-part series focused on precision selling and how to influence others and motivate them towards a better future. In episode 2, we explored setting effective meetings using post, asking powerful questions, and then telling a compelling story. Together again today, we're with Steven and Suzanne Wooley, and we're going to explore into the key topics of gaining agreement to truly move forward, leading activities forward, whether it be a sale or an agreement together into an organization. And then also the important part leadership plays in really building capability in your people in this area of how to influence, how to sell, using these precision selling techniques that Susan and Steven have so kindly provided us insights on. Let's get into the episode. Can't wait to explore these topics today.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where we share knowledge from global experts in how to create high-performance, agile cultures of continuous improvement and innovation. Cultures where employees wake up smiling and excited to go to work and make a difference. Cultures where leaders feel they have the time to proactively serve the growth of themselves and others.
I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. By improving our organisations, we create a better future for generations to come. An economy where our children and grandchildren can experience the joy of owning their first home. An environment where they can enjoy holidays on clean beaches and marvel at the beauty of nature. A future where they feel safe, respected, and empowered to make a difference at work, bringing that energy home to their families and communities. This show is proudly brought to you by the Enterprise Excellence Community and Group, which is focused on helping organisations create this better future through this podcast, our community, where you can engage with global experts, tour best practice sites, and also our workshops focused on the most important topics to truly help your organisation improve into the future for those it serves. Visit enterpriseexcellencegroup.com.au to learn more. We're going on to another topic now that's also extremely important, like they all are, which is gaining agreement and leading the sale forward. So, Steven, in leading a sale forward and gaining agreement, why is it so important to sales?
This is where as the saying goes, the rubber hits the road, right? The gaining agreement, we're either going to gain agreement or we're not going to. If we're going to understand whether what we've got and what we're going to be offering is something that the customer or stakeholders want to say yes to. So, gaining agreement kind of comes straight after the story. So if we can imagine or visualize that, Suzanne or yourself, Brad, or somebody else from PepsiCo or globally has then just brought to life this great story, and we've just finished up and we've recaptivated and said, look, this is the size of a prize. If we were to do these things together, this is what you're going to get, and this is why us, for example. Then the first thing we want to do in the agreement stage is to check in and just ask another question. Hey, Suzanne. Hey, Brad. What do you think? How do you feel about this recommendation or these propositions? Suzanne mentioned previously around insights, discovery, and colours. We all have our own different preferences, and this is one of the times to absolutely dial into those colours and preferences. So half of the population have more of a preference for making a decision with their head. So therefore you might want to say, hey, what do you think about this recommendation? And half of the population have a preference about making a decision more with their heart. Hey, Brad, how do you feel about this recommendation? So think or feel may sound small, may sound nuanced. It is, but it will then connect to treat others how they wish to be treated, and you'll be able to understand and connect with them around that aspect of it. So first of all, we kind of want to test the water. What do you think? How do you feel? If you're listening to this kind of going, I don't know anything about colours, just try to either intersperse in what do you think, how do you feel, or an agnostic sound is how does that sound to you? Right. But we really want to understand, first of all, what their attitude, what their appetite is for what we've shared. And then once we've done that and they've said, it's on the right lines or it's going well, then we want to have an approach that we can work through to be able to get all the way through to the agreement area.
It's really simple, isn't it? I love again that adaptation to insights into someone's preferences of thinking or feeling. Stephen, with going about this process of gaining agreement, do you mind explaining to the listeners an approach if an objection rears up at this stage? You know, you've gone through your great presentation, compelling story, you've tested the water, and then you start to have some rocks come up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, I mean, this is reality, right? So before the rocks come up, I would suggest that, when people are saying, what do you think? How do you feel? How does that sound? And you get something back. The vast majority of the time, you're going to be having some sort of affirmative. It's like, yeah, I like some of it, for example. That's going to be a classic sort of response. The first thing I would suggest and encourage is for people to manage their emotional state under a little bit of pressure that could be seeping in at this stage, which is if someone said, yeah, I like some of it, or yeah, you're going along the right lines. The first thing is saying, hey, Brad, hey, Suzanne, what is it that you're placing value on right now? What is it that what is showing up and is working for you? i.e. build momentum first. All too often we see people wanting to go down that rabbit hole of like, oh, what is it that you don't like? And, there's a reason for it, because we're 3 times more wired for threat than we are for reward, right? So we kind of go into there must be a problem first. Before we kind of go into that area, I'd encourage, do ask, what do you place value on? What are you liking? What are you enjoying? What's working for you? And then they will tell you those things that are working, and enjoy taking some time to understand that. And then link that back to those prioritized needs from the pivot earlier on in the meeting or on a future or an earlier occasion, right? So, I'm glad you like that, Brad or Suzanne, because previously you said that was your number 1 need or your number 3 need or whatever it is. So creating that link is all powerful. But once we have understood what they value, then we want to have the confidence. Now, Brad, you said we're almost there, or you like most of it. That's suggesting we're not quite there yet. And then again, use your body language, something small like this, and say, Brad, what is it that we're currently not quite there yet with? And currently, if I say to you, Brad, what is it that we're currently not quite there yet with? What is it that I'm intimating?
It's something we can overcome. It's only currently in our perception right now.
Okay, and it could well be that, right? And we have the intention to seek to overcome it, right? So what is it that we're not quite there yet with? And then they might say something like, price. That'd be a surprise, wouldn't it, for example? Or it could be about timing or logistics or supply chain or whatever it is. Something big could come back and say, that's interesting. Okay, what is it specifically about price that means we're not quite there yet? Okay, and then get them to be specific about it. And they might say, is it about an overrider or a listing fee or the actual margin? So we want people to specify and get it smaller and smaller. And then ask some other questions around, but what's driving that? What's kind of a root cause of that? Okay, to get to the nub of it. Now, buyers are very well trained. Many of the buyers are very well trained. So they may have a genuine objection, or they may be just trying it on or something in between, right? And by asking specific probing questions, what is it we're not quite there yet? What would be the corridors of acceptability? So all of these just open questions again will start to allow you to understand where their buyers are maybe just trying it on or where they have a genuine need. So you're kind of starting to kind of really suss that out a little bit. And if we have the mindset, which is an objection, all it is an unsatisfied need, we're just doing what we did earlier in the process, which is we want to seek first to understand. So we can kind of chill out and relax and kind of go, okay, there's just something we're not quite there yet with. What is it specifically? What's driving that? What would be in the area or the zone of kind of acceptability? We know everybody kind of wants this, but kind of what could we live within? And you just want to pull that information from people and to see what is possible. And then ask customers, what are some of their solutions? What are some of their suggestions? We don't feel like we've got to own it all. Allow them, they've also got a load of experience. It takes a bit of pressure off. So what are your views? What could be alternatives? And then you can consider some of those alternatives And that's where, if you need to negotiate, that's when you would negotiate. And I think for your listeners, our listeners, that's one of the key things that we get asked a lot, which is, when do you negotiate? Now, ultimately, if we've got through the story, and then we've said, what do you think? How do you feel? How do we sound? What is it that you place most value on? What are you liking? What are you enjoying? Where are you placing value? What is it we're not quite there yet? If anybody is negotiating before then, you're destroying value too early in the process. So it's only when we kind of get to that end bit of agreement, and we might have to circle around it a few or several times, that's the place you would negotiate and then start to move into your variables and so on.
Yeah, I love in the event where we talk about not playing whack-a-mole, where as soon as you start to hear a concern from a customer, don't necessarily just jump on it, because you can end up dancing like you're on a hot tin roof. But it's more, I guess, waiting for the right time, like you mentioned, and even building up on those value points first, to be very clear on them and the linkages before we do start to go understand, is there any showstoppers? And I'm guessing often there may not be a showstopper at all. Suzanne, what's been... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sometimes there isn't, right? Sometimes we've created enough value through asking those great questions, and we've understood their personal needs, their category needs, their company needs, and we've got enough solutions for them, right? So, we may well sell our way through it. When we do the best buying experience exercise that we talked at the head of this podcast about, very rarely does price come into it. Very rarely, because you get all of the other behaviors right, and you have enough of an acceptable commercial value proposition where you can show true value, then price plays a smaller part. Now, we're not naive, of course, a certain value and pricing needs to be in a sort of threshold, but there's so many other things that people will place value on, and why they will say yes to you.
Mm-hmm. Suzanne, what's been your experience with PepsiCo of building capability around gaining agreement and leading the sale forward?
I think taking the time to allow the person opposite you to explain everything that's a concern. I think as salespeople, when you get a concern, there's the need, the want to address that straight away, rather than just asking further questions, probing, and really getting to the bottom of everything. Because someone could say one objection, but actually there's something else bigger that's there. So if you take the time to explore all of them and get everything out on the table, then you're in a better position to discuss, negotiate, or address, or bring something that's better to the party. So I think that's one thing that I like seeing people reflect on, is taking time to not react and allow people to express the concerns that they've got. And I think that when it comes, obviously there's dealing with people's objections, but also making things happen. One of the interesting points I found when Expression for Growth showed from their research is so few people actually make something happen. I think it was like 20% of people make everything happen. And what a waste of time from everyone. You've gone through the buyer's time, your time, all this prep beforehand. And if you don't make it happen, what was the point in the first place? So I think that was another good thing to bring to people's consciousness, is put in place either at the end of the meeting or the following meeting, or document. We've got that many options in technology now. There's really no excuse for not having reminders or something in place to make sure that you bring to life what you agreed with someone. So yeah, that's a failure on a salesperson's part if they don't make everything happen, or go back and say why you're not. We've looked into this was a problem, and just letting someone know. But that disappointment from someone on the other end when you haven't actioned anything is really damaging to the relationship. So I think the two things of understanding people's objections, letting them get them all out before you address them, and then making sure that when you have made agreements that you're making it happen and that you take real responsibility for that, was a good way to look at the end of the sales process.
Yeah, I think in the event, again, I love the scenario we do where we get everyone to grab a bit of paper and we fold it up and we do it really fast as a facilitator, and we get them to tear corners off and they pull it open and all the origami looks different. And we go, well, whose problem was that? Well, it was it was myself the facilitator because it was my job to own the outcome that we all end up the same origami. But I think, what is it, Suzanne, that you think that stops us from actually really sometimes owning the next steps and being clear on those actions and when they're going to be delivered and leading those actions through?
I think documentation is a really big part, right? And that's where the taking notes in the meeting is important, because you've got a lot going on. You're listening to someone, you're showing your body language, you're telling your compelling story. You take notes in the meeting, then afterwards you can capture it. You also replay at the end of the meeting and clarify. And someone might say, oh, you were going to send me this as well, weren't you? If you haven't clarified it, that could be a miss in itself, just from forgetting in the moment. So I think documenting, not having fear of going back with a no as well. We can't do everything. And I think sometimes people have a fear of going back and saying this wasn't possible. I think that holds us back. And, back to a relationship, if you had a relationship with someone, you wouldn't have that fear. Whereas when it's a buyer seller, there's a bit of nervousness there. So I think if you can overcome the fear and your own reticence to that, that's one key part, documenting it, and also not getting carried away with how busy life is and work is. Back-to-back meetings you mentioned earlier, you've got to have the space to plan, prepare, and action things that you're committed to.
Yeah, too true. Stephen, your thoughts on that piece too of ownership and seeing it through at the end?
Yeah, it's interesting. The world over, we see people like running out of time at the end of a meeting, rather than preparing and knowing, do you know what, at the end of the meeting, if we were to break down you can have a great meeting in 25 minutes, right? You can go from what we call post to pivot, that understanding section in around about less than 10 minutes. The story, only about 5 minutes. But then that allows you a good 10 minutes to do the agreement. And as Suzanne says, take time to understand where value is, take time to understand where current objections, or we're not quite there yet with, for example, as well as then taking that time at the end to agree what is the plan. And how many people, as we're listening or watching this podcast, do we actually come out of a meeting with written down or typed up, where Suzanne's got her eyeballs on it, Brad, you've got your eyeballs on it, I've got my eyeballs on it, on what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, who and when, and critically, when we're going to meet up next, date and time in the Outlook calendar, rather than wasting all that time going back and forth after the meeting. But we're going to meet up next week. Well, next week when? What day works for you? Mornings, afternoon, right? And land the time and basically set up your next post for your next meeting in the meeting. That's kind of one of the biggest efficiency gains, and it also allows certainty and expectation, so people psychologically are kind of feeling much more comforted about it and more trust in that valued partnership. But outside of that, then one of the big missings that we see is, what is success going to be measured on? So you've just said yes to something, but is it going to be measuring penetration, frequency, weight of purchase, market share, category margin? What are those success criteria metrics? And how much are we looking to go from something to something? Over what period? Goes back to the start with the end in mind and the objective. And when are we going to review, and who's going to bring which data to the party to be able to make sure we measure that success? And unfortunately, the world over, far too many salespeople move on to the next shiny thing versus actually land that whole agreement and then check in with your customer. How did we do against that? What worked? What didn't work? What's a repeatable success? What could we learn to do differently next time? And they're the things that really create value, by having a good review on success measures and criteria.
I can really see that this part of the whole journey is so critical, because you do all that work to get agreement, but then if you don't deliver effectively on it, what's happened to that customer relationship? There's no faster way to really make it hard to win the next deal, isn't there? So it's such an important part, and thank you for sharing around the whole piece of how to effectively close out the sale, on considering someone's color or preferences, on insights, how to then really lean into the value if you can sense that there's some concerns there, then how do you handle a concern? And then also, like Suzanne and Stephen, you just covered, how do you effectively make it happen? And the importance of capturing and being clear on that and defining those actions and tracking those actions and setting the next meeting before you leave the last meeting and being very clear on those outcomes. Like, there's so much gold in that section to truly help salespeople stay in that 5% club. We're on to the next topic now, which is extremely important. And I just want to set this up with the two bits of data that I love. One part is that with any event where you go and learn, I think the old studies show that 10% happen in formal learning, and then 20% happens through social learning, the extra bit of learning you might do after it. But then 70% is all about on the job and putting it into practice and really making it happen. And I think with every customer that we work with, it's about, well, how do we help them go on that learning journey? Because it's about capability build, not just running an event. And I also am real passionate about the studies done by a chap called Ebbinghorst, which looks at how fast we can forget things as humans, and how quickly we can learn something, but then it dissipates from our mind. And that brings us to the topic of leadership, practice, and coaching. Like, Stephen, in your view, why is practice and coaching so important?
Well, ultimately, leadership and creating a culture of coaching and performance is really the shadow of what sales leaders or commercial leaders should all be about, right? And it is a profession. We are professionals in what we do. The period of time, the amount of time, if we work on average of, I don't know, let's call it 35, 40 hours a week, the real question for us is to be asking, how many hours of a week are we in front of our customer as a salesperson? And for some people, it might be as few as 2, and other people, it might be as high as, I don't know, another number, like 15, for example, or so. And everyone will have their own number, right? And it's a great one to reflect on, what is your number of how many actual minutes or hours a week are you in front of a customer on the field of play, just like a sports analogy. And there's a clue in the title, isn't it? We're all salespeople. We're customer representatives. We might have different job titles, but ultimately that's our job, to be customer facing and to be able to build great relationships. And if we are only spending a small proportion of our time in front of a customer, what are we doing with the rest of the time? And who is that serving? The great leaders, and Suzanne is one of those great leaders, has an utter belief of creating a performance culture, about coaching, about investing time to do purposeful practice. And a load of people have written great books about it, about 10,000 hours of purposeful practice creates eliteness. So, the psychology, the data, the research is there. And I would encourage people just to be thinking like other professional, whether it's a professional sports person or an actor or an actress. You would not go on the field of play or on the stage or in front of the TV cameras without doing a rehearsal. But how many salespeople wing it every single day, right? Versus creating a culture where you can learn from field visits, co-visits, peer-to-peer, purposeful practice for yourself and rehearsal. And that's the thing that creates moves from knowledge into skill into long-term behaviors.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? So important. Without it, all that effort of sitting in an event, a lot of it can be lost. Susan, what's your thoughts and experience with PepsiCo and yourself around coaching and building capability?
Well, I think what you just said earlier around the best place that things get actioned from training is where you hear, see, do. And the only place that you're doing that is when someone else is with you or you're out with a customer. And if you don't have someone with you, you can do part of the review, but having someone alongside you to observe, to replay, and to make sure that you take time to have a quality conversation and a reflection around what could I have done better? What did I do well? And how can I leverage that? But also, how can I improve? It is just so important. And I'm really, really passionate about strong coaches. I was lucky enough, again, early in my career, to have a really great coach, and she would very rarely ever give me the answer. She would always ask me a question that meant I had to think about it myself. And that trained me to stop asking the question, to think about myself. How would I review it first? And tell her first. And so that was really inspiring for me in my career. But it's so important in terms of your manager coaching you, spending time visiting a meeting with you, but not taking over, not leading, not taking that role, but being a coach before and after you've had an interaction with someone. So I'm really passionate that we drive our coaching skills at PepsiCo. That's why we have a global coaching program. We've got global models that we have. We invest a lot of resource in making sure that we're trying to develop great coaches here. And just in terms of a personal experience, I've got young children at the moment, and I see lots. I'm back and forth to every sport that's going on in my neighborhood, gymnastics, soccer, mountain biking. And when you watch the difference between a good coach and a not so great coach, it makes a difference to your performance, to your enjoyment, to your memories of that. And that's the same for sales, right? It's your enthusiasm. If someone's asking you and it's important on their agenda, you feel inspired to develop your skills, to go on that journey of development. And I've been lucky enough to have that. And I really want to make sure that everyone that works for us has that experience as well.
It's a great approach and great really belief and really desire to create great outcomes at PepsiCo, which you are. Steven, I know with Expression for Growth, you have some really neat, simple tools that the group's created to help with this. I love the coaching check sheet. It really visual, simple. You've also got a lot of other templates and tools that help. What led Expression for Growth down the path to make these very simple tools that leaders and team members alike can use to reflect and learn and keep coaching themselves or coaching others?
Yeah, it's it goes back to the whole purpose why we've got our agency, which is we're there to be able to help people in commercial roles in multinationals enjoy performing at their best, and we can only do that by having consistent, simple, pragmatic ways of working, right? And when we have a real great relationship with people like Suzanne at PepsiCo, and who believes in it and about coaching and creating that environment, some simple tools can really help. And people who may be listening for this approach, it's one simple tool or a mindset is the difference between feedback and coaching. Feedback is often going to be shorter, sharper, a bit more tell type thing, and we have a simple model for that, which is CAR, which is CAR, context, action, result. Context is we're just talking about the post. The action is what I noticed you did, and the result is the impact that it had, right? So first of all, separating things out and kind of going, no, that feedback can be really good. To be able to use in the moment, and whether it's a developmental bit of feedback or whether it's giving feedback about something really positive and encouraging that you've done, having a simple tool. Or you might have a coaching model, which might be, there's lots of different coaching models out there. It could be grow, or it could be fish, for example. But then that's, as Suzanne was talking about, you're pulling from the coachee. And just understanding the difference between feedback and coaching, and then how you blend the two together, is one aspect. Another aspect around, yes, a coaching checklist, so a nice simple form, which also helps with preparation. And it goes back to having the same process, the same approach. And if it's the same approach, then people, teams, systems can coach around the same thing, just like sport, right? So we know what we're aiming towards. We know what we're doing well. Keep building that confidence. That's great. Keep doing that. It's great, great, great. There's one or two areas here to develop. And that's where we can then have that purposeful practice, coaching, using the technology, record yourself, listen back to your own audio. If it's a virtual meeting, just press the record bit, and to see how many open or closed questions there are when you look at the transcript. If you're doing a co-visit, as Suzanne does a lot, which is brilliant with the field sales, co-visits and field sales, they can have great observational. One of the things we see, one of the biggest gaps world over, is when the dollar value goes higher and people go from field sales or front sales to key accounts, the co-visits become less, the coaching becomes less, but the stakes are much higher. So I'd encourage people across all elements of sales to be able to look for peer-to-peer, hierarchical coaching, observation. Sometimes you can record yourself, other times you'll do it with a colleague, and to be able to have regular check-ins to absolutely build your confidence about the things you're doing really well, and then focus on the 1 or 2 areas where you're looking for another 1 point change.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful. When it comes down to it, I guess in a lot of work that I do, the greatest leaders are leaders who serve the growth of themselves and others. And the way that you do that is be constantly focusing on their growth. An interesting thing I discovered recently myself, Steven and Suzanne, just a fun fact, is I've got a leadership work that I'm doing coming up. And I thought to myself, like, there's so much been written on leadership over the years and from so many different angles. Like, you could find every angle you want on leadership. So I thought to myself, okay, well, I'm going to go back to the word leader and look at where's it come from. And because the origins have to tell us something. And when you look at the origins of leader, it comes from a Germanic word called leiden or leiden. And it basically means to guide, bring forth, and grow others. And when you look at the word leader and its origins way back in history, it's about growing people, growing yourself and growing others, and everyone head in a certain direction together. It simplifies a lot, doesn't it? But it also plays out the power of what we're talking about on this topic, which is about really leading, coaching, supporting, growing people. Yeah, well, Steven and Suzanne, thank you so much for your time on this topic. And I know that we've got a website where anyone can go to analyze where they're at on precision selling, the topics that we've been talking about throughout this podcast. And that is a website, precisionselling.scoreapp.com. I'll say that again, precisionselling.scoreapp, SCOREAPP.com. And you can go there and explore where you're currently at on this journey of being in the top 5% club, and then use that insight to help yourself grow and move further forward. So Steven and Suzanne, thank you so much for your time, knowledge, and expertise in helping us share knowledge and create a better future. Really get more of us up in that 5% club, and through that, create great outcomes for customers and the economy and all the great things that flow on from better sales.
Thanks, Brad. It's been really good to revisit some of these topics, and I hope that this can help refresh in the minds of some of our listeners what they learned on precision selling, or for those that haven't had the chance yet to ask some great questions about how they can get involved in it going forward. So thank you for your support, Brad, when you've been running the courses. It's been a great experience for our team, and Steve, absolutely great partnership with you guys. So thank you.
And yeah, may I echo my thanks for creating the opportunity for people who are watching or listening. We trust that this has given either a good reminder or some top tips or some pragmatic things as you are, maybe driving to a customer meeting. Maybe you're listening to it, maybe you're watching it. Ultimately, you guys really matter. It's a profession which is something to be proud of. And together we can have that purposeful practice and enjoy being part of the 5% Club. And Brad, your gift of bringing this opportunity to us today to have this conversation, your fantastic facilitation, and Suzanne, the culture of absolutely cultivating those commercial skills is top of the game, and you are growing that bench, and you're clear of what that benchmark is, and it's a joy to partner. So thank you.
Thanks, Steven.
Cheers all. Thanks, Steven. Thanks, Suzanne. Bye for now. What a great episode. Remember, you can visit the website precisionselling.scoreapp.com with yourself or with your team to explore your current state capabilities in relation to precision selling and influencing. There were 2 key takeaways for me from this episode. The first one was the aspect of leading the sale forward or leading the agreement forward. Again, this comes down to key basic aspects of setting smart, actions and outcomes, and actually using good project management or activity management sequences and techniques to truly get the outcome. An agreement's only the starting point to a great experience, to great results. It requires good execution. The second part for me was, of course, as always, the important aspect leadership play and truly building capability in this area of influencing. We've been so lucky having Ms. Suzanne Wooley of PepsiCo and Mr. Steven Edney of Expression for Growth share this knowledge and expertise for us on a topic that is used by so many of our largest organisations around the world. Thanks again for your time and knowledge, Susan and Steven. Thanks for helping us create a better future. Bye for now.